My military surgeon wife rushed her ex-husband into the ER. I was leaning against the wall, blood soaking my side. Derek rolled right past me on a stretcher. One hand still gripped my wife, Rebecca Harper, by the wrist. Even through his oxygen mask, he managed to smile. Tell your husband to stop making that face. Rebecca, I am the one who really needs you. She never even glanced at my bleeding shirt. She just snapped at the nurse, put Mark in the yellow zone. He can wait. I pressed my thumb against my torn ribs. My other hand opened my phone camera. The young nurse hesitated. Colonel Harper. He is actively bleeding. He is conscious, Rebecca snapped. Derek has internal injuries. Prep operating room 3. Derek disappeared through the double doors. Rebecca followed right behind him. She never looked back. That was the exact moment my marriage died. Not when I caught her texting late at night. Not when Derek kept showing up for dinner. Not when she told me 3 weeks ago Derek is fragile. Stop making him feel unwelcome. It died under the harsh lights of the St. Gabriel Military Hospital ER. My blood dripped onto the floor. Meanwhile, my wife chose the man who spent months trying to replace me. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I recorded Rebecca's back as she pushed into surgery. Then I sent the video to 3 people. First, my divorce attorney, Margaret Chen, the independent trustee of the Ward Military Medical Foundation, and Dr. Leonardo Foster. He was the only trauma surgeon at that hospital who owed Rebecca absolutely nothing. A young nurse crouched beside me, pressing gauze to my side. Her tag read Priya. Sir, I am so sorry, she whispered. I will go get someone. Don't apologize, I told her. Just document exactly what happened. She glanced toward the surgical doors. Everything, I repeated. She nodded. 5 minutes later, Dr. Leonardo Foster marched down the hall with 2 surgical residents and a wheelchair. Mark, he said, jaw tight. Who triaged you? Your surgical director, I replied. His eyes went completely dark. He didn't ask another question in that hallway. He just wheeled me straight into exam room 4. He cut open my shirt, ordered scans, blood tests, sutures, and a full trauma record. He spoke like a doctor, not a friend. Deep lacerations, 2 cracked ribs, moderate blood loss, but no organ rupture. Thank God. Keep the medical record clean. I am always clean. Save the hallway footage. He paused, already requested it. At 2:17 a.m., Rebecca finally exited the operating room. I caught her reflection in the dark glass before she even noticed me. Hair tucked under a cap, scrubs stained with blood. Her face looked exhausted, but not broken. Derek had survived. I could read it all over her. She walked in, acting like I owed her. Mark, Derek almost died. I just looked at the heavy bandages covering my waist. I noticed you were busy. Her lips tightened. Just don't what? Don't drag this between us. I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was flawless. My blood was still on those tiles. You're perfectly stable. You never even checked. I was handling a life or death crisis. Right. His life. She tore off her scrub cap, tossing it on the counter. He crashed his car because he wanted to warn me about you. That made me look up. Warn you about what? He said you threatened to kill his research funding. He panicked and crashed near the service entrance. He told you this on the stretcher. He texted me before the crash. I grabbed my phone. Mark, I launched my banking app. Her voice sharpened. What are you doing? Fixing what upset him. I froze the discretionary research grant scheduled to hit his account at 6 a.m. Then I revoked Rebecca's secondary access to the Ward Foundation Emergency Fund. A notification flashed instantly. Transfer cancelled. Rebecca's phone instantly vibrated inside her surgical gown. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, then looked up as if I had slapped her face. You can't do this. I just did. That grant covers 3 trial patients. No, it covers Derek's salary. It pays for his conference suites, and that private apartment you claimed was for visiting scholars. Her expression shifted. No guilt, only calculation. Mark, this is not the time. That's exactly what you said when my blood was pooling outside your operating room. She took a step closer. Listen, you're hurt. You're angry. I get it. But if you're cutting hospital funding just out of jealousy, I will absolutely never forgive you. There it is. Not betrayal, not abandonment, just pure jealousy. I opened my messages and forwarded the video to Margaret Chen with a single note. File this at dawn. Rebecca spotted the name on my screen. Her hand froze mid-air. Why are you texting, Margaret? I looked at her because she has the papers. For the first time tonight, Rebecca actually looked me in the eye. You're overreacting. You're seriously divorcing me for saving a patient. I am divorcing you because you left your bleeding husband in that hallway and called it medical judgment. Her stare turned cold. Derek was her patient. I was her husband. She looked away first. That tiny gesture told me way more than any confession ever could. At 4:43 a.m., Margaret walked into the hospital wearing a grey coat, holding a black folder and 2 coffees. The stitches pulled tight as I sat down. You should be in bed. I told her I already served my time in the hallway. We progressed. Margaret did not smile. She opened the folder. Divorce papers, an emergency motion to lock down our marital assets, a notice revoking spousal financial access, a foundation conflict review, and a draft complaint to the Hospital Ethics and Practice Committee. We can file as soon as the court opens. The preservation notice goes out right now. I signed the first page, then the second, then the third. By the time dawn broke through those hospital windows, my signature looked perfectly steady. Rebecca stood near the coffee machine in a clean surgical gown, gripping her phone. Her eyes flicked from me to Margaret and finally to the documents. Mark, she said slowly, go home, let us talk. I capped the pen. She insisted I could not make decisions like this after trauma. I made them while I was still bleeding out. Margaret gathered the signed documents and slid an envelope across the table. Colonel Harper, you are hereby formally notified. Mr. Ward is initiating divorce proceedings today. Any communication regarding assets, joint property, or foundation matters must be routed through legal counsel. Rebecca just stared at the envelope, her fingers refusing to touch it. You brought a lawyer to the hospital. No. I said you brought your ex into my marriage. I just brought a lawyer to end it. Behind her, Derek's mother walked down the hall, sobbing softly. Colonel Harper, Derek is looking for you. Rebecca turned around on pure instinct. That single reflex was my final answer. I stood up, keeping one hand carefully pressed against my bandaged side, and walked right past her. She reached for my sleeve, but I stepped out of range. At 6:02 a.m., my first real counterattack landed. Rebecca's hospital card was declined at the pharmacy terminal. The screen flashed red. Authorization revoked. She stared blankly at the machine, then looked across the lobby right at me. I offered zero explanation. No pause. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Margaret submitted. For the first time since Derek Bell crashed back into our lives, Rebecca Harper had absolutely no idea what I would do next. Rebecca never came home that morning. Derek needed monitoring. Derek needed to be soothed. Derek needed the exact woman who once promised she would never let her past sit at our dining table. I went home totally alone. The house felt way too clean, overly expensive, and meticulously arranged around a marriage completely hollowed out from the inside. Derek's coat still hung on the porch hook, not mine. Dark grey wool from Italy, paid for by a temporary patient liaison stipend. Rebecca claimed he needed it until his consulting contract came through. I took it down, folded it up, and dropped it into a cardboard box. Then I walked through the entire house, stripping away everything that did not belong to me, to Rebecca, or the marriage we actually built. Derek's coffee cup from the kitchen cabinet. His spare charger from the guest room. Derek's sneakers by my garage fridge. His framed photo inside Rebecca's study. That photo stopped me dead. It was not an old one. It was taken just last month. A picture of Rebecca and Derek standing together at a Boston medical conference. His arm rested around her waist, her head tilted slightly toward his shoulder. Behind them hung a banner for the Ward Foundation Surgical Innovation Gala. My foundation, my money, my wife, his hand. I photographed the frame, dropped it into Margaret's evidence folder, and boxed it up. At 9:30 a.m., I called a locksmith. By 10:15 a.m., I revoked Derek's access to the building. At 10:40 a.m., I wiped Rebecca's permission to add guests into the property management system. At 11:05 a.m., I sent a formal notice to our security company. Derek Black is not allowed to enter under any circumstances. If Colonel Harper objects, document the incident and contact Mr. Ward's attorney. Then I sat at the kitchen island and pulled up our joint account. The list was staggering. Private wine club memberships, ridiculous hotel charges, luxury medical conference upgrades, a men's watch, 3 transfers tagged as emergency repayments. Each one linked directly to Derek. Approved by Rebecca and drawn from the family account I funded because Rebecca once told me a surgeon should never have to think about money after saving lives all day. I printed every single page out. At noon, Rebecca finally called. I let it ring twice before picking up. You changed the door code. She confirmed she was standing outside her own house. Her house. Silence. Then a low, dangerous breath. Mark, do not do this, she warned. I am done. This is my marital home. Your name is not on the deed. You refused when I offered. You claimed property documents felt unromantic, remember? That was before you turned this place into a weapon, I replied. No, that was before you moved Derek into the guest room while I was away in Singapore, passing it off as temporary recovery support. He had nowhere to go, she claimed. But he has 2 parents, a downtown apartment and an ex-wife in Denver. Rebecca's tone sharpened. You investigated him. I just paid his bills, I replied, so I saw everything. She lowered her voice. Open the gate, she demanded. She needed her clothes. I told her I already packed a bag for her. Security would bring it out. I packed one for Derek too. Then another voice came through the phone. Weak, dramatic, uncomfortably familiar. Mark, buddy, this is ugly. Rebecca just saved my life. I let out a cold laugh. He sounded sturdy enough to call a rideshare. Rebecca snapped, telling me not to talk to him like that. Here it comes. Did she really think I was still competing with him? You are acting like a jealous husband, she said. Not at all. A jealous husband would ask why she loves another man. I am asking why another man is spending my cash, entering my house and using my donor badge, taking my wife's priority while I bleed on the tiles. Derek muttered something. Rebecca covered the phone, but just a second too late. I heard him tell her I was always so dramatic and to just let me cool off. I opened the security app and pulled up the gate camera. Rebecca stood beside Derek's wheelchair, resting her hand gently on his shoulder. A hospital wristband still wrapped his wrist, a blanket over his legs, pale enough to earn sympathy from anyone who had not watched him smirk through an oxygen mask. I saved the footage. Next time you call me jealous, I told Rebecca, have Derek take his hand off your leg. On the screen, her body froze. Derek quickly pulled his hand back. She looked up at the camera. Good, now she knew I was watching. Open the door, she pleaded, saying we could come inside and discuss boundaries. No, we discuss terms through lawyers. We are married, she insisted, not for long. You are going to throw away 10 years over one ER visit. I stood up and walked into the hallway where our wedding photo still hung. Rebecca in silk, bathed in sunlight. I looked like someone who actually believed promises had weight. One ER visit, I repeated. That visit was just the first time you could not hide your choice. Her voice softened once her most effective weapon. Mark, please, she begged. He is terrified. Derek almost died. He was part of my life long before you. Yesterday, I told her I was part of your life. She had no answer for that. I took the wedding photo off the wall. The rectangle left behind was a shade darker than the surrounding paint. That is exactly what remains when a marriage gets removed. An imprint, not a home. I am sending security out now. Mark, if you embarrass me in front of the staff, she started. You embarrass me in front of the entire emergency department, I fired back, just reminding you. No, Rebecca, you are adjusting. Reminders do not work anymore. I hung up the phone. 3 minutes later, security pushed 2 suitcases right to the front gate, one black, one grey. Derek reached for the grey suitcase and tried the old access code again. Denied. He tried a second time. Denied. His lips tightened. Rebecca stared at the keypad. then looked straight into the camera for the first time. I saw it clearly, not regret but pure fear. Not fear of losing her husband, fear of losing her access. My phone vibrated. A text from her mother, Cynthia Harper, demanding I open the door. Stop being cruel. Rebecca is exhausted and Derek is injured. This is not how family treats each other, I just replied with a photo. Derek resting his hand on Rebecca's thigh right outside my front door. Then I added a message: family does not bring an ex back to the marital home after leaving a husband bleeding in a hospital hallway. Cynthia went dead silent. At 2:20 p.m, Rebecca tried swiping a shared card at the hotel right across from San Gabriel. Declined. Then, at 2:34, she tried the platinum card I gave her for household expenses. Declined again. By 2:41 p.m, Derek attempted to use the foundation's emergency card at the exact same hotel. Flagged. At 2:43, the finance director called my personal cell. Mr. Ward, he said, Colonel Harper's guests are trying to use the trauma outreach account to pay for a luxury suite. It has already been declined. He is arguing with the front desk. Good. Do you need to speak with Colonel Harper? No, just send me everything tomorrow. By evening, the very first small price was paid. Derek Black, the man Rebecca insisted had nowhere to go, sat in the public hotel lobby with a hospital blanket draped over his shoulders. The suite he expected my money to cover was suddenly completely out of reach. Rebecca called again at 7:16 p.m. This time, she did not sound angry. She sounded controlled. That was worse. Mark, Derek was humiliated out there. He should not have spent my money. He is recovering from surgery. He has recovered well enough to rub your thigh on camera. She took a slow, deep breath. My father wants us for dinner tomorrow night. Just the adults, no lawyers. I said no. Then he will come to you, she warned. He can talk to my lawyer, Mark. You are turning the entire family into enemies. Your family turned me into an ATM with a pulse. You do not mean that. I absolutely do. Heavy silence. Then she said the words that spared me months of guilt. If you loved me, you would not punish a patient just to hurt me. I stared at the discharge papers Leonardo just sent over. Patient Mark Ward. Delayed assessment after non-standard triage intervention. I told her she punished her husband to save her ex. Then I hung up. 9 p.m. At the hotel, a courier arrived. Margaret had already served Rebecca the first formal notice asset preservation, a strict demand to stop using marital funds for Derek Black, plus a pending ethics complaint. Rebecca actually signed for it. Down in the lobby, because she couldn't even book a room upstairs, hotel cameras caught Derek leaning over her shoulder to read the paperwork. They also caught him stepping back first, not holding her, not protecting her at all, just stepping away. The very first crack in the grand love story where she chose him over me. 11:38 p.m. The doorbell rang. I checked the feed. Rebecca stood outside alone. No suitcase, no Derek, just my wife, still wearing the necklace I bought her after my first independent transplant surgery. She looked into the lens and begged me to let her in. I watched her for 10 long seconds. Then I turned off the monitor. The guy who would have opened that door was left bleeding in a hospital hallway. I was no longer that person. By morning, Rebecca switched tactics. She stopped calling me cruel and started calling me unstable. That was pretty smart. A cruel husband is just a personal issue, but an unstable donor is a professional threat. At 8:12 a.m., Margaret forwarded an email from Rebecca's hospital account. Subject line: concerns regarding donor conduct. Colonel Rebecca Harper wrote to the St. Gabriel Executive Committee. She claimed I weaponized foundation funds against a patient over simple marital troubles. She described Derek as a vulnerable surgical patient, herself as a physician caught in a moral dilemma, and me as emotionally unstable. She completely left out the hallway, the tampered triage, the hotel suite, the room access, the credit cards, the private transfers, or the simple fact that Derek Black had been sleeping in my home while I was away on business. Margaret called 2 minutes later. She said Rebecca is building a record. So are we. We already are, but she is moving fast. She always does when she thinks she's the absolute smartest person in the room. Margaret's tone turned completely ice cold. Mark, listen carefully. Don't react emotionally. Never contact hospital leadership directly without my strict review. Do not argue with her family. Do not threaten Derek. Every single word you say now either helps you or helps them. I know. I mean it, Mark. I built compliance systems for hospital networks for 7 years. Evidence first. Emotions always come later, she exhaled. Good. Then make sure you bury them properly. By noon, we were sitting in her office, not the glass tower kind. Margaret hated that kind of show. Her firm occupied the 3rd floor of a converted brick building with thick, heavy doors, quiet carpets, and a conference room that smelled faintly of old paper and fresh coffee. On the table between us lay 8 distinct folders: hallway footage, traj records, financial transfers, and property access logs, marital assets, foundation authorizations, Derek Black's deep background check, plus Rebecca's entire communication history. Margaret tapped the first folder. She asked if Leonardo saved the footage and would sign a statement. He already has, I said. I slid the printout across. Leonardo Foster's written statement was brief and clean. It read at approximately 23:41, Mr. Mark Ward was found lying in the emergency department hallway. With active bleeding from a torso wound, Colonel Rebecca Harper instructed staff to triage him as yellow zone. This was despite visible blood loss and without even examining him herself. I subsequently took over treatment and fully documented the injuries requiring immediate attention. Margaret read it twice. Good man, she noted. He doesn't like messy medical records. He might have just saved your case. He saved far more than that. Next came Priya's statement. Then the nurse's notes, my video, and the front gate footage. Then the credit card decline records, the hotel attempts, and the transfer records. Margaret paused sharply at the financial folder. $382,000 transferred over 14 months to Derek, his LLC, and connected suppliers. Rebecca approved everything. Most under her login, but 2 under mine. She looked up. I never authorized those. Her pen stopped dead. Well, that completely changes the nature of things. I suppose it does. Margaret singled out those 2 transactions. Outright forgery or unauthorized access. Either way, this goes way beyond divorce. I know. She leaned back in her chair and asked, do you know what this means? If Derek used your credentials and Rebecca either actively helped him or just turned a blind eye, the hospital could face a massive conflict investigation. The foundation might suspend funding entirely. Law enforcement could get involved. I told her I never asked for mercy. I wasn't planning to, she replied. At 2 p.m. we signed preservation letters. One to St. Gabriel, one to the hospital's risk management office, one to the State Medical Board's complaint division, another to the Ward Foundation's audit committee, and one straight to Derek Black. The letter to Derek was my favorite because it was the shortest. Mr. Black, you are officially required to preserve all records, communications, equipment, financial documents, and access credentials, plus any messages and materials involving Colonel Rebecca Harper, Mark Ward, Ward Foundation funds, or St. Gabriel Medical Center, and any transactions conducted in Mr. Ward's name or under his specific authorization. Do not destroy or hide any evidence. Margaret signed in black ink, sent it today. Then she slid the divorce petition across the table. I filed it yesterday. They served her at the hotel. Rebecca has 21 days to respond. With those asset issues, we can apply for a temporary order. I told her to do it. Lock down the house and the vehicles. The Range Rover is mine. The Porsche is leased through our family account. She keeps her own car. Derek has 0 property rights. Remove him from absolutely everything. Margaret took notes. Lawyers only. She won't respect that. Rebecca expects total obedience when she enters an operating room. Losing access will just make her escalate. Let her. Margaret studied me. You sound pretty calm. I am. You were bleeding 2 nights ago. I learned something useful. What? My own wife can watch me bleed and still expect consideration. Margaret's face hardened. Then let's ensure she never gets to ask again. At 4:30 p.m., the messenger handed the documents to Derek at that rehab center near the hospital. He signed with his left hand, so dramatic. At 4:47 p.m., he texted from a number I blocked months ago. You are crazy. Rebecca won't forgive you for attacking the guy she saved. I grabbed a screenshot. Another message appeared. You were always jealous because she loved me first. I took another screenshot. Maybe if you were more of a man, she wouldn't need me around at all. Screenshot. You better back off before I tell everyone what actually happened before the accident. Now that one was important. Sent it to Margaret. She replied, do not respond. Also, good. At 5:12 p.m., Rebecca called from a blocked number. I answered in silence. She immediately asked if I sent legal threats to Derek while he recovered. I stayed quiet. She called it harassment. Said I was scaring him. I just stared at Derek's text, the one warning me to back off before he revealed what actually happened before the accident. No, I finally told her. He is trying to scare me. What do you mean? Ask him what happened before the accident. A long pause. She warned me not to twist the facts. I am preserving them, I replied. You will ruin him. He brought it on himself. He almost died, she said. And I almost became the convenient villain in that email you sent the board. Her breath caught. Good. She knew exactly which email. She called it confidential. I said defamatory. She countered with protective. Protecting who? She had no answer. I let the silence hang until she finally broke it. Derek said, you threatened him. I cancelled the payment after I was left bleeding. He said it was before that. He is lying. She asked why she should believe me, instead of a man who nearly died helping me. I said no. I expect your lawyer to explain the legal discovery. Her voice dropped. She accused me of enjoying this. No, Rebecca, I enjoyed being married. This is just cleanup. She made a sharp noise, like I struck a nerve. Mark, do not call me again. Mark, please. I just ended the call and forwarded that recording to Margaret. At exactly 6 p.m., the first institutional response arrived. St. Gabriel Risk Management officially confirmed receipt of the security demand. At 6:08, the Ward Foundation Audit Committee froze all discretionary funds related to Rebecca's department, pending review. By 6:22, Derek texted Rebecca. He claimed he knew because I accidentally sent it to an old group chat I made months ago for meeting logistics. Ellie, make him stop. That freeze could easily expose the bridge transfer. He deleted it 11 seconds later. Not nearly fast enough. I stared at the message. Bridge transfer. Margaret called before I could even reach her. She asked if I saw it. I did. Do you know what a bridge transfer means? I have a guess. Do not guess, she replied. We are issuing a subpoena. At 7:40 p.m., Rebecca fired off her final message in the group chat. Derek, do not write anything else. Too late. That third folder on Margaret's desk had just turned into a lethal blade, and for the very first time, Derek Black had cut himself on it. Rebecca's father really hated being ignored. Gerald Harper built his entire life believing every single room had a head seat, and he belonged right in it. He was not a surgeon, yet he discussed medicine like the hospital was his private family estate, and patients were mere tenants. At 10 a.m., he sent me a direct message. Family dinner tonight at 7. You must attend. No lawyers. This farce ends today. I replied no. He immediately called. I let it ring. He sent another message demanding I show his daughter respect. I replied I already gave her 10 years. She gave my seat to Derek. 3 typing dots appeared, vanished, then returned. Be there at 7 or I will come to your house. Forwarded to Margaret. She replied, only go if you want to control the scene. Bring a recorder, have witnesses nearby, and do not drink. I thought for 30 seconds, then texted Gerard, 7 o'clock, 1 hour. Derek cannot be there. Fast reply. Of course. That is how I knew Derek would definitely show. The Harper estate sat behind stone pillars and old money landscaping. Well, everyone knew Rebecca's income. Just as they knew my donations quietly funded these recent renovations. Gerard opened the door himself. His smile was noticeably stiff when I walked up. You look much better. Thank your daughter for not killing me. His jaw tightened, but he let me in. Cynthia stood there. Red eyes. pearls. Rebecca waited near the dining room entrance, wearing a cream sweater, her arms crossed tight against her chest. She looked thinner than 2 days ago. Derek sat in my chair. Not just any chair. My chair at the Harper family table. The one Gerard pointed out years ago when he said, "You are family now." Derek wore a grey cardigan, bandages clearly visible. A beautifully fragile performance. He looked up, giving a cautious little smile. "Mark, I had no idea Rebecca invited you." She closed her eyes. "Gerard cut in. Derek needs support. You agreed to this." "He got discharged," she said softly. "He should not be alone. You refused my help." "I refused your help." Derek's smile thinned out. Cynthia stepped in. "Mark, please sit down. Let us talk like adults." "Sit where?" She blinked. "Where exactly should I sit, Cynthia? My usual chair is taken." Derek started to stand. One hand pressed dramatically to his side. "No, I can move. I did not realize seats were assigned." I looked right at him. "Did you realize?" Rebecca snapped. "Enough." I slowly turned to her. "You left me bleeding." 2 days later, he sits at my family's table. Your family's table. Careful with that word. Enough. Gerard slammed a hand on the sideboard. "You cannot speak to my daughter like that in my house." "Your house?" Eyes narrowed. I pulled an envelope from my coat, dropped it on the foyer table. "What is that?" he demanded. "A copy of the loan modification." Cynthia's face fell first. She knew. Gerard reached for it, tore it open, and pulled out the paperwork. The family renovation loan. The one I quietly guaranteed 3 years ago, back when Gerard's investments tanked. Rebecca begged me not to embarrass her parents, so I handled it privately. No speeches, no reminders, 0 interest, just a signature. Gerard read the terms, his mouth pulling tight. "You are dragging money into family matters." "No, you dragged Derek into my marriage. I just brought documents." Rebecca took a step toward me. "Mark, do not." "Don't what?" "Remind your father that the kitchen where he serves Derek dinner exists partly because I backed his loan." Cynthia murmured Gerard's name. Derek leaned back. He dropped the act, stopped pretending to stand. I looked at him. "You look pretty comfortable." He lifted his chin. "Maybe, if you paid attention to Rebecca, she would not need someone else to support her." That was the very first true thing he said all night. Not the truth, but close. He wanted my chair, my money, and my wife's public loyalty. He wanted me to lose my temper so he could play the victim. I refused to give him that. I just pulled out my phone and opened the Harper family group chat. Gerard, Cynthia, and Rebecca. Her brother Paul, 2 aunts, 3 cousins. The exact same people who spent 2 days calling me cruel. I uploaded 3 things: the hallway clip, the gate clip, and the foundation account rejection record linked right to Derek's name. Then I typed a text. "Since this is a family matter, here are the facts your daughter conveniently omitted." Phones started buzzing everywhere. Cynthia grabbed hers. Gerard's expression turned dark as the video played. Rebecca rushed at me. "Take it down. It is already sent. You do not have the right. You gave them a story. I gave evidence." Derek's phone buzzed too. He looked down. Everything changed. Not fear. Exposure. Cynthia covered her mouth. The hallway audio echoed through the dining room. "Put Mark in the yellow zone. He can wait." Rebecca froze. Gerard slowly lowered his hand. "Loan documents forgotten." Paul replied first in the chat. "Wait, he is bleeding." "Rebecca? What the hell?" Then, "Aunt Mary, why is Derek using Mark's card?" Cousin Beth chimed in. "Is this real?" Rebecca whispered. "You humiliated me in front of my family?" "No," I corrected her. "I corrected a lie told to your audience." Derek pushed his chair back. "This is abuse. He is trying to isolate you, Ellie." I angled my phone toward him, tapped one more photo. His hand on Rebecca's thigh outside my door. "Say that again." His mouth snapped shut. Gerard looked from Derek to Rebecca. "Is that true?" She did not answer fast enough. Cynthia collapsed into a chair like her knees gave out. "Mark," she trembled. "We did not know." "I know." Gerard turned to Rebecca. "You told me he was punishing a patient." Her voice cracked. "He was." "No," I shook my head once. "I was ending access privileges. There is a difference." Derek stood up. one hand dramatically gripping his chair. Derek snapped that he refused to stay and be slandered. "Sit down," Gerald said. Derek froze. For the first time all night, Gerald wasn't looking at me like the problem. He was treating Derek like a massive burden. Derek definitely noticed. Rebecca did too. I tossed the second envelope on the table. It was a formal notice terminating my guarantee on that supplemental renovation loan at the earliest contractual date. "Your bank will reach out about alternative collateral." Gerald lost all color. He told me I couldn't. "Can you sign the terms?" Cynthia stared at Rebecca. "You swore Mark would never pull something like this." Rebecca teared up. "He wouldn't have before." I grabbed my coat. "You are absolutely right. The guy who loved you never would have." She stepped toward me, begging me to wait. I stopped at the door. "You wanted me here without a lawyer. Well, you got me. Next time you want special conditions, call Margaret." Derek piped up from behind, real bitterness bleeding through that wounded victim act. He asked if having cash made me better than them. I turned around. "No, having actual evidence makes me better than you." I walked right out. I barely reached the driveway when my phone buzzed. "Paul Harper. I am sorry, I had no idea. If you need someone to prove Derek lived there last month, I saw him." I just stood there staring at the screen. Here it was, the very first family witness. The first real crack in Rebecca's fortress right behind me. Through the front window, I spotted Derek just standing alone next to my empty chair. Nobody had told him to sit back down. The next attack came disguised as peace. Rebecca sent a message through Margaret right at 8 in the morning. "Colonel Harper requests mediation on a personal matter. She asked that Mr. Ward refrain from public disclosure while both parties attempt a private resolution." Margaret forwarded it with a tiny note. Translation: "She wants you to shut your mouth before more people start asking real questions." I texted back. I would accept the offer only if Derek was excluded, and she agreed all communication goes entirely through lawyers. Rebecca completely refused. Instead, she showed up at the employee entrance of St. Gabriel right at noon, Derek hovering beside her. She brought a hospital administrator named Dennis. No relation to Derek, but he was highly interested in our foundation funds. Margaret and I were already waiting, not inside the building, but in an independent notary and record-keeping office right across the street. The whole meeting was arranged for document authentication. I had zero intention of letting Rebecca turn that hospital into her personal stage. Dennis walked in looking visibly annoyed. "Mr. Ward, this was not necessary." Pretty bold opener from a hospital that just got a legal preservation request. He sat down. Rebecca didn't. Derek just stood behind her chair like some kind of bodyguard, armed with fresh surgical scars and borrowed courage. Margaret placed a digital voice recorder right in the center of the table. She announced it was recording. "Of course it is." Margaret shot him a look. "Mr. Black, you are not a party to this divorce. I am the accusing party here. You are just the subject of the evidence." His jaw visibly tightened. Rebecca slid a thick file from her folder straight toward me. She demanded I sign it today. I didn't even touch it. Margaret did. She scanned that first page, then let out a dry, totally humorless laugh. It was a mutual apology statement. Rebecca lifted her chin. She claimed the situation already harmed patients, staff morale, and her own professional reputation. "Mark has created a hostile environment," she added. Margaret quietly turned a page. I just watched Rebecca's fingers, the famously steady hands of a surgeon. Those same hands held a scalpel over Derek while my own blood dried in the hallway. Margaret read the terms aloud. "Mr. Ward acknowledges that his actions following the emergency incident involving Mr. Derek Black were purely emotionally driven and definitely not based on any professional misconduct by Colonel Harper." I stared right at Rebecca. She met my gaze. "You actually want me to say you did nothing wrong?" "I want you to stop escalating things," she replied. "So you want me to lie?" "I want you to remember exactly who I am." That sentence landed like a cold scalpel against bone. Who was she really? Chief Surgeon. Golden daughter. The woman everyone protected because she saved lives. My wife when convenient. Derek's absolute shield when it actually mattered. I leaned back in my chair. "I remember exactly who you are. Her confident expression flickered. Then Derek cut in. "Mark, just be reasonable. You are actively hurting her career." I turned my head slowly. "Good. You finally found something you care about." He flushed red. Dennis cleared his throat. "Mr. Ward, the hospital is getting concerned about donor instability. The Ward Foundation has historically funded surgical innovation here at St. Gabriel's. We really do not want personal conflicts jeopardizing public benefit." Margaret slid another file folder across the table. "Then you will appreciate this." Dennis opened it. His eyes moved fast, then completely slowed. "What exactly is this?" "A preliminary notice of independent audit. The results," Margaret said, "feature completely unauthorized charges, potential credential misuse, and donation account access violations involving Mr. Black, Colonel Harper's department, and 2 accounts currently under Foundation review." Rebecca immediately reached for the folder. Dennis did not give it to her. He just kept reading. Derek snapped that it was fake. I opened my laptop, spun it around, and played the lobby footage. Derek at the front desk. Derek handing over the Foundation card. Derek saying Colonel Harper must have cleared this. The Ward people always reimburse. Rebecca went completely still. Dennis stared at Derek. "The Ward people always reimburse," I repeated. Derek just opened his mouth. Silence. Margaret slid another page forward. "Plus, Mr. Ward never authorized 2 logins traced back to Mr. Black's consulting firm." Dennis put his briefcase down. "Rebecca, what is this?" she asked cautiously. "Administrative chaos. That is what people call theft right before the lawyers show up," I said. Derek slammed his hand on the table. "I am trying to keep a trial alive." Margaret stared at him by booking suites. His hand balled into a fist. Rebecca touched his arm. Derek, that single touch said everything. Even here, facing hard evidence, she soothed him first. I stood up. Rebecca's eyes darted right to me. "Where are you going to sign something?" Hope flickered across her face. "Not a lot, but enough." I grabbed the apology statement, flipped to the signature page, and ripped it in half. Then I signed the papers Margaret handed over to me. The first was a formal complaint to the State Medical Board against Colonel Rebecca Harper, citing a conflict of interest. Failure to examine a spouse patient after direct involvement in triage classification, authority abuse, and potential risk. Retaliatory narratives following a patient complaint. Rebecca's face fell when she saw the title Mark. I signed the second document, a civil notice to Derek Black for unauthorized use of funds and evidence preservation. Derek immediately stepped forward. Margaret warned him to be careful. He froze. I signed the third, a demand for St. Gabriel to surrender unedited hallway footage, triage logs, access records, or task assignment files, and all messages between Rebecca, Derek, and management on the day of the incident. Dennis rubbed his forehead. "This is spiraling totally out of control." "No," I replied. "When a bleeding patient gets downgraded because a surgeon wants to save her ex first, that is out of control. This is control coming back." Rebecca kept her voice low. "You are trying to destroy me. I am removing myself from the wreckage you call loyalty. I saved his life. You say that like it gives you the right to ruin mine." She flinched. Derek seized the moment. He is jealous because he knows what we had. I stared at him for a full second. Then I opened another folder and pulled out a photograph. It showed Derek in my guest room wearing my robe, holding a cup from my kitchen. The date was 3 months ago, captured by the security system. Rebecca just stared at it. Derek froze completely. He said he only stayed for a weekend, I repeated. Rebecca whispered, "You were in Singapore." "Yes, and you turned my house into a recovery suite for your ex." Dennis suddenly stood up. "I should not be here." "No," Margaret shot back, "you absolutely should be here. You are a witness to the attempted coercion." He sat right back down. Rebecca looked from him to Margaret to me. For the very first time, the room did not bend toward her. The first formal shadow of the law had finally entered. It sat on the table between us, sealed in signed black ink. As we left, Derek followed me into the hallway. Margaret was right behind, phone in hand. Derek lowered his voice. "You think you can take everything? Just because you have some documents?" "No." I stepped closer, just enough to make him look up. I think I can take back what is mine because you were stupid enough to leave fingerprints. His eyes hardened. Rebecca will choose me. She already has. That confused him. I kept going. That is why she will lose too. Behind him, Rebecca heard every single word. She looked like someone had opened a trapdoor beneath her feet. As I walked away, she never called my name, not because she accepted it, but because she was finally starting to understand that I was not trying to win her back. St. Gabriel held its annual surgical innovation dinner 4 days after I filed for divorce. Rebecca tried to postpone it. The board refused. Too many donors had flown in. Too many cameras were booked. Too many glossy programs had been printed with her on the cover, and Derek Black listed under strategic research partner. My name appeared in tiny print right beneath the Ward Foundation logo. That used to be exactly how I liked it. Quiet money, quiet support, quietly protecting the woman I loved. But quiet had become the space where Derek stole and Rebecca just acquiesced. So I arrived that night in the only way that mattered, with documents. Margaret arrived beside me, dressed in black. Leonardo Foster came 10 minutes later. Priya followed, nervous but sitting upright. Paul Harper stood near the bar, completely avoiding his parents. Gerald and Cynthia sat near the front, their faces stiff, still deciding whether the scandal was real or merely inconvenient. Rebecca stood on stage in a deep blue gown, diamonds on her earlobes, holding the rigid posture of a surgeon in every line of her body. Derek stood right beside her. For a guy supposedly too weak to cover his own hotel bill, he looked pretty healthy to me. His smile just sharpened. Rebecca followed his gaze, her grip tightening on the microphone. The whole program kicked off with applause, heavy speeches, a slick innovation video, and a montage of Rebecca saving lives. Then Derek stepped up to the podium. My recovery this week reminded me of something, he said, his voice warm and totally practiced. Medicine is never about the self. It is all about sacrifice. I watched Rebecca close her eyes for a second, clearly moved. He kept going. The Harper-Blake emergency pathway expanding formally tonight is pure proof of what happens when clinicians put patients above politics. Harper-Blake. I shot a look at Margaret, and she gave a tiny nod. Derek clicked to the next slide, bringing up a complex diagram. The emergency pathway triage flow donor-funded response model. That was my model, not my money, my actual work. I wrote the very first version after my mother died, waiting 40 minutes for a transfer approval. It took 2 long years with Leonardo, Priya, and a rural trauma coalition to build that protocol. Before Rebecca even laid eyes on it, Derek just changed the title. That was it. I developed this model after seeing massive gaps in emergency care during my early collaboration with Rebecca. Leonardo whispered right next to me. Derek just smiled at the crowd tonight. With Colonel Harper backing us, I am so proud to announce the Blake Rapid Surgical Decision Initiative. The applause started. I stood up, nothing dramatic, just enough. Margaret smoothly handed a sealed document packet to the event coordinator down at the edge of the stage. The coordinator skimmed the cover letter, went completely pale, and frantically signaled the audio-visual tech. Derek kept talking too often. Bureaucracy delays care. Too often, personal feelings blur urgent choices. Then, the massive screen behind him shifted, not to his next slide, but to the original 2018 protocol cover the Ward Foster emergency access model. Right below it were signatures. Mine, Leonardo Foster's, Priya Shaw, and 3 county hospital administrators. But not Derek Blake. The applause completely fractured. Derek turned around. That practiced smile lingered half a second too long. Then the giant screen advanced again, flashing an email from Derek Blake to Rebecca Harper. Subject line read, rebranding issue. Ellie, if we want external support, Ward's name cannot stay on this. He will never know. He hates public credit anyway. The entire room shifted. Not a gasp, but a physical shift. Bodies leaned forward. Faces turned. Donors stopped sipping their expensive wine. Rebecca just stared up at the screen, lips parted. Derek glared up at the audiovisual control room. Turn that off. But it didn't turn off. Margaret had quietly paid for independent event recording, and after those deleted group chat messages exposed Derek's potential donor misrepresentation, securing a temporary order to preserve all presentation materials, the next slide finally appeared. Rebecca's reply: "Take Mark's name off the naming. He won't care as long as the patients actually benefit." I looked right at her. She looked back at me. Just this once. She had absolutely no operating room to hide in now. Derek tightly gripped the podium. "These are taken out of context." Leonardo stepped up beside me. "No, they really aren't." Head snapped toward him. He walked straight down the aisle, stopping well before the stage. "Mark Ward and I developed that model together after his mother passed away. Priya Shaw helped test every single triage safeguard. Colonel Harper later implemented parts of it internally over at San Gabriel. Mr. Blake had absolutely no author role." Derek's face tightened. "You resent me for making improvements." Priya stood up as well, her voice trembling slightly at first, before finally steadying. "You removed the safeguard, the strict requirement for an independent triage review when a surgeon has a personal relationship with a patient." The silence totally hardened. That statement carried way more weight than any emotional accusation. It tied the stolen model directly to the corridor. Rebecca stepped back from the heavy podium. Gerald just watched her from the front row. Cynthia's hand rose nervously to her necklace. Margaret walked calmly towards the stage, handing a folder directly to Dennis Ware. "On behalf of the Ward Foundation Audit Committee, consider this formal notice. All dinner commitments related to the Blake Initiative are suspended pending a full investigation. All use of the Ward Foundation brand is immediately revoked. The foundation will never fund any project with misattributed authorship or dangerously compromised triage safeguards." Dennis looked like he had swallowed broken glass. "That is $12 million. Someone over at the donor table muttered. "No," I called out from the aisle. "It is 22 million. The entire room heard me. Rebecca heard me too. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. At least, not yet. She still had her stubborn pride holding them back. Derek completely abandoned the podium, marching down the steps toward me. "You planned all of this. You set us up." I shook my head. "No, I just let you present your own lies in front of the people paying for them." His voice dropped. "You are destroying patient care." Leonardo fired back before I could answer. Patient care is not some cheap costume for fraud. Derek looked desperately at Rebecca say something. She just stood at the edge of the stage, totally caught between the man she had saved and the brutal evidence he dragged her into. "Derek," she asked carefully, "did you actually remove Mark's name from the materials?" He just stared at her. That was the only answer needed. The dinner didn't collapse instantly, it unraveled quietly and efficiently. The donor asked for a copy of the audit notice. Board members scattered to the corners with their phones. Dennis pulled away. Leaving Rebecca aside, Gerald walked straight past Derek without even saying a word. Cynthia just sat there, frozen. Paul came over, said he would testify about the guest room. Rebecca noticed him, and that stung worse than losing the donor. Derek tried following her backstage. A security guard blocked his path, telling Mr. Blake that management needed him ready for questions. He looked right at Rebecca. She didn't save him. Not this time. My phone buzzed. Ward Foundation Audit Committee. Emergency meeting approved. The funding freeze expanded and external forensic accountants were hired. Then came another text from Margaret. Phase 1, public reversal complete. Across the room, Rebecca stood in the shadows. No longer radiant, no longer untouchable, just a woman watching $22 million of her initiative disappear. Her family's certainty and all the borrowed glory burning up in the same clean flame. She found me near the exit. "Mark," she started, her voice shaking. I had no idea he went that far. I glanced at the screen, still displaying her email. "Remove Mark's name from the project. You knew plenty." Her hand reached out toward me, then stopped midair. She remembered the hospital cafe, the gate, the lawyer's notice. How my sleeve no longer belonged to her. "Mark, please don't leave like this." I glanced toward the stage. "Derek is waiting for you to save him again." She looked over. He really was watching her, not with love, but with expectation. That was the difference she had somehow mistaken for need. Before she could choose, I walked out. Behind me, a donor asked Dennis whether St. Gabriel intended to return the misdirected funds voluntarily or wait for litigation. That was the first major public reversal, and it was only the beginning. 2 nights after the dinner, Rebecca showed up at my house, and she didn't use the front gate. She parked outside and hiked up the hill in heels completely wrong for the gravel path, clutching a folder to her chest like a shield. Security buzzed me first. Colonel Harper is at the pedestrian entrance. Is Derek with her? No, sir. Then let her walk to the porch. But I didn't open the door. I just watched her on the camera. She looked entirely exhausted, worse than any surgery ever made her. Surgery made her sharp. The scandal made her human. She rang the doorbell, and I answered through the intercom speaker. I told her to send it to Margaret. Her face lifted to the camera. I am not here to discuss documents. Then you came to the wrong door. Mark, please, 10 minutes. I am not here to fight, she said. You are here because fighting no longer works to your advantage. She closed her eyes. When she finally opened them, there were tears. The old me would have opened the door, offered tea, a blanket, and forgiveness wrapped in conversation. The new me just watched the feed and waited. I made mistakes, she told me. That is a pretty small word for leaving your bleeding husband behind in a hallway. Her lips trembled. I thought you were stable. I thought Derek was dying. I really thought I could fix it all later. You fixed it by writing an email calling me emotional. I was afraid of losing you, she said, looking back down. The real truth arrived before her words did. I was afraid everything would fall apart. Everything meant her career, the donors, her family, and Derek, not me. She hugged the folder tighter, saying she wanted to settle things privately through Margaret. She wanted to apologize privately. Apologies are for people who stopped, I told her. I have stopped, she insisted. Is Derek still in your hospital network? He has been suspended pending review. Is he still in your phone? Dead silence. Good night, Rebecca. Mark, wait, but I just cut the speaker off. She stood on that porch for 6 minutes. Then her phone rang. She answered it. Even through the camera, I could see Derek's name on the screen because she hadn't bothered to change his contact photo. Taking one last look at my front door, she walked back down the hill, already talking to him. That night, Derek filed a police report. Margaret called at 11:20 p.m. and told me not to panic. I hate sentences starting that way. He claims you threatened him outside the dinner party and pushed him near the service corridor, aggravating his surgical injury. I sat straight up. He what? He filed a complaint for harassment and assault. I never even touched him. I told her I knew there were cameras. Then why call? Because he wants leverage before that audit report officially lands. We make our move first thing at 8:30 a.m. Margaret and I walked into the police station. Not dragged in, not defensive, just walked right in. A detective named Alvarez met us in a tiny interview room. She had tired eyes and a very cautious voice. Mr. Ward, Mr. Blake claims ongoing harassment related to your divorce. Margaret slapped a folder onto the table before answering. I am providing this before my client answers a single question. Time-stamped video from the dinner party corridor, plus witness names and the event's security logs. Alvarez looked down at the folder, then back up at me. You came prepared. Derek is nothing if not predictable. She studied the footage on the station monitor. I stood by the exit. Derek approached. He snapped at me. Stepped right into my personal space. I backed away. Margaret intervened. Security moved in. I never even touched the guy. Then a second camera angle caught Derek clutching his wound and bending over before the guards showed up. Alvarez replayed that exact moment twice. She found it pretty interesting. Margaret slid Derek's text across the table. It warned me to back off before he revealed what really happened before the accident. Alvarez read it. Her expression shifted. She asked if I believed Mr. Blake caused the crash intentionally. I told her no. I believe he knows something he desperately wants to keep hidden, like why he texted my wife before the wreck, claiming I was threatening him, why he drove past the hospital service entrance, why he somehow had access to the donor fund account, and why he tried spinning the narrative before anyone checked the records. Alvarez scribbled some notes. Did you threaten him? No. Did you harass him? Not at all. Did you reach out after the legal preservation order came down? No. Margaret pointed out that Mr. Blake repeatedly contacted my client. We have records. Alvarez leaned back in her chair. Margaret warned that this might not go the way Mr. Blake expects. It honestly rarely does. By noon, the police threw out Derek's complaint after reviewing the station footage. At 1:15 p.m., Margaret filed a preservation notice citing his false report as sheer retaliation. Right at 8 p.m., Rebecca called Margaret. Margaret put her on speakerphone with my permission. Rebecca sounded completely tense. She begged to talk to Mark because he was right there. Margaret reminded her everything goes through the lawyer. Rebecca asked if I went to the cops. I said yes, which wasn't enough. Margaret stated that Mr. Blake filed a report. We just responded with evidence. Rebecca took a breath. She said Derek was called in to explain. I told her he just had surgery, but still made a fake accusation. She called it unfair. He was scared. I leaned toward the phone. I asked her, when the scared person is Derek, how many crimes does fear actually excuse? Dead silence. Then she softly said I backed him into a corner. I called him a liar. She didn't know what to believe anymore. I said, that's her problem. Her breath hitched. She insisted it was our problem. I replied that our problem is this ending marriage. Her problem was the man she kept protecting. The silence dragged on for too long. I almost thought she hung up. Then she finally whispered, if he lied about this, what else had he been lying about all along? Margaret ended the call, instructing her to keep all future communication formal. Later that night, Derek tried striking again. Not with the police this time. He weaponized sympathy. Posting from his hospital bed, he wrote that some people punish others just to survive. He thanked the doctors who chose life over ego. He never mentioned my name. He simply didn't need to. Comments flooded in from hospital staff, Rebecca's friends, and strangers who love tragic stories about wounded men. Then, Paul Harper left a comment. He asked why he sat in Mark's chair while Paul bled in a hallway for 2 days. Was that choosing life? The traction suddenly died. Bria commented that she documented everything, telling him not to turn patient safety into drama. Leonardo added that fake narratives hurt real patients. By midnight, Derek completely deleted the post. By morning, those screenshots had already reached the hospital review board. Rebecca stayed totally silent that day. But right at 3 p.m., she got served a copy of a temporary court order. Rebecca was fully banned from moving marital funds, and Derek was locked out of any accounts tied to me, my private foundation, or my personal property. The judge ordered the preservation of every single message between Derek, Rebecca, and those disputed funds. But the very next sentence was the kicker. The court found enough preliminary evidence of unauthorized use of marital and foundation money to force an expedited financial disclosure. Margaret read the document aloud in her office. Expedited disclosure. That meant they couldn't just stall for time anymore. I signed the paperwork. Outside, traffic crawled by like nothing was different, but absolutely everything had changed. Derek's lies had drawn police attention. Rebecca's quiet evasion brought severe court scrutiny. And my wife, the woman who honestly believed she could survive any crisis just by keeping a cool head, was about to learn that staying calm doesn't wipe the slate clean. That evening, the audit committee discovered the very first forged invoice. It bore Rebecca's department approval alongside Derek's bank information. My mother's name was engraved on St. Gabriel's East Wing, but not my mother's, the Lillian Ward Trauma Access Center. I personally requested that exact name after she passed. She didn't die because her doctors lacked skill. She died because the medical system slowly failed her, and everyone involved had some perfectly reasonable excuse ready. No bed, no approval, no transfer authorization, no specialist available, and no one guilty enough to actually blame. That is why I fund systems, not statues. Rebecca knew that. Derek only understood the money. Just one of them truly knew the grief behind it. Once the forged invoices leaked, the St. Gabriel board scrambled to call an emergency donor meeting. Margaret told me to go. Not to negotiate, she said, but to set the boundaries. They held it at the Lillian Ward Center, right in a conference room overlooking the ambulance bay. Rebecca walked in to find me already sitting there with Dennis, alongside the board chair, 2 hospital lawyers, the chief compliance officer, Leonardo, and Tessa Anwin, our forensic accountant. Derek was a no-show, yet his absence somehow filled the entire room. Rebecca shot me one quick look, her eyes locking onto the bandage poking out right beneath my collar. She quickly looked away. Board chair Patricia Sloan opened the floor, sounding like someone tiptoeing around a major gas leak. "Mr. Ward, we appreciate you meeting us." "I am here to protect my mother's name," I replied. Rebecca flinched. Good, some words should hurt. Patricia clasped her hands together. She said the board acknowledges severe concerns about naming rights, donated funds, and that emergency department incident. "We have fully suspended Mr. Blake's consulting access, pending review." I glanced at Tessa. She flipped her folder open. "With all due respect, Chair Sloan, our financial review shows way more than just access problems." We dug up 9 invoices from Blake Clinical Strategies LLC, all charged directly to restricted grant funds. 6 had 0 deliverables, and 2 used duplicate descriptions stolen from previous legitimate vendors, and 1 looking an awful lot like personal expenses. Dennis shifted awkwardly. Rebecca just stared at the table. Margaret asked who approved them. Tessa eyed Rebecca, authorized straight through Colonel Harper's department. Rebecca sat up rigid. "My admin staff handles all the routine processing." Tessa nodded. "Maybe so, but 3 approvals have notes demanding urgent action from your personal account." Rebecca's mouth dropped, totally soundless. Margaret slid a printed page across the desk. Rebecca read it, fingers curling tightly around the edges. The note said to fast-track this for Derek. "Mark does not need to see the small items." Small items. $48,000. "I never wrote this," Rebecca whispered. The room instantly tensed. I studied her face closely. For once, I actually believed her. Not because she was innocent, but because of how genuinely hurt she looked right then. Exactly the way someone looks when they realize their own weapon just got turned against them, Tessa noted. "So someone used your login credentials." Rebecca lifted her eyes, not looking at me, but at the empty chair where Derek should have been sitting. Another massive crack. Margaret spoke up calmly. "We need the device logs." The hospital lawyer nodded, saying they were already extracting them. Patricia turned my way. "Mr. Ward, what exactly is the Foundation's position here?" I flipped open the folder I had brought along. "The Ward Foundation is pulling all discretionary support for Colonel Harper's department until a full external review wraps up. Those restricted patient care funds will move to independent management, ensuring the patients are never harmed. The Blake Initiative name is completely banned. The original Ward model continues only if it gets independent oversight." Rebecca looked up sharply. "You are removing me. I am removing the conflict. This is my department, and this is my mother's wing." The room soaked up those words. Nobody tried to correct me. Rebecca dropped her voice. "I built the surgical program. You built it with my money." Leonardo's agreement. Priya's hard implementation work alongside the entire hospital staff. You let Derek walk right through it. Her cheeks flushed. Patricia cleared her throat. "Colonel Harper will face an administrative review regarding both the triage incident and the serious funding violations. A temporary cut to leadership authority might be necessary." Rebecca whipped toward her. Patricia said this was not optional. A month ago, hearing that would have been unthinkable. Rebecca Harper did not lose authority. She gained it. She used to enter rooms, and people just moved. Now she sat under my mother's legacy while a panel decided what she was allowed to know. My phone vibrated with a message. "Paul Harper. Dad is furious at Derek. Mum keeps crying." Rebecca told them she never knew about those forged invoices. "Do you actually believe her?" I typed back, "Not entirely. Not nearly enough." Because that was the honest truth. Maybe Derek did forge those notes. Maybe Rebecca did not approve every single expense, but she created the environment where Derek could easily access those accounts, use her authority, hide behind her emotions. Negligence wearing a wedding ring was still absolute betrayal. After the meeting, Rebecca chased me into the hallway. "Mark!" she called. I kept walking. "Mark, stop!" I finally halted by the donor wall. My mother's photo hung right there, small, elegant, smiling like she genuinely believed this hospital was a safe place. Rebecca stopped behind me. Her voice went completely soft. I never knew about the forged invoices. You knew he was using my account, I replied. I thought it was temporary. You knew he wanted to wipe my name from that agreement. She tightly closed her eyes. Yes, the word dropped between us. No excuses, no begging for patience, no telling me I do not understand. Just yes. Why? She glanced at my mother's photo, then back at me. Because he said whenever your name was mentioned, he felt like absolutely nothing. And you fixed that by making me nothing, I replied, her face twisted in pain. Mark, I thought you didn't care about credit. I don't care about applause. I care about the truth. She swallowed hard. I was wrong. Yes, I am trying to say that. No, you're trying to say that before the audit says more. Her eyes welled up. I went to your house. I took Derek's call right on your porch. The color completely drained from her face. You saw it. I see a lot now. She pressed her hand to her mouth, then slowly lowered it. He said he was panicking. He always panics when the consequences actually arrive. I know that now. No, you only suspect it now. You'll know it when he blames you. She looked at me like I had just said something unbelievably cruel, but I had said something accurate. At 5 in the afternoon, the hospital permanently deactivated Derek's badge. At 5:22, the donor relations office removed his name from all event pages. By 6, 3 major donors requested updated grant terms, excluding Rebecca's direct control until the review wrapped up. At 6:40, Gerald Harper called me. His voice was way quieter this time. Mark, I owe you an apology. No, you owe your daughter honesty. I thought you were punishing her. I am holding her accountable. He went silent. Then he finally spoke. Derek asked me for money today. I stared at the driveway. How much? 200,000, said it was for legal fees. Said Rebecca would pay me back once things settled down. Did you give it to him? No. Good. He told Cynthia you were actively trying to bankrupt the family. He tells people what they fear most. Gerald breathed heavily on the line. I misjudged you. Yes, I am sorry. I accept the apology, but it doesn't change anything. I understand. I didn't end that call with any satisfaction. Apologies are not currency. They cannot buy back a hallway. That night, Rebecca tried to enter her hospital office. Her badge still opened the main building, but not the financial suite. The access logs hit my desk through evidence disclosure 2 weeks later. 7:13 p.m. Badge denied. 7:14 p.m. Badge denied. 7:15 p.m. Badge denied. A camera captured her just standing in front of that door, staring at the red light. That image stayed in my mind, not because I enjoyed it, but because it showed the exact second she learned what I learned in the hallway. Access can disappear while you are still reaching for the door. Derek Black vanished for 26 hours. Not legally, not dramatically. He just stopped answering calls, left his rehab facility, and checked out of the cheap hotel Rebecca paid for with her own card after I stopped working. Rebecca called him 14 times. We know this because the evidence disclosure later produced her call logs. 14 calls, 3 voicemails, 1 text message. Derek, please tell me you didn't use my credentials. Then another text. If you lied to me about the invoices, I need to know right now. Then the most important one. I defended you in front of Mark. Derek didn't reply to that one either. At 9:30 the next morning, he was busy. Tessa Anwin sent an urgent update to Margaret, the hospital compliance office, and the foundation audit committee. Subject line: major findings at Blake Clinical Strategy. Margaret called me right into her office. Sit down. I'd rather stand. I sat down. She slid the report directly in front of me. It wasn't just a single forged invoice, it was a pattern. Restricted grant funds were getting routed through. Blake Clinical Strategy paid out to Rural Implementation Consulting, dated right when Derek was in Miami. A laptop purchased as a patient outreach device was shipped straight to his apartment. 2 wire transfers to a shell supplier registered under Derek's cousin's name, and a reimbursement request carrying my electronic signature, not a scanner signature copied from an old donor authorization letter. My stomach went ice cold. Margaret looked at me. This is entering criminal referral territory. Then do it already. Drafted. I turned a page. There were private messages. Derek to Rebecca. I can't keep going to Mark's people for every little approval. Just let me run the bridge. Then Rebecca to Derek. Keep it below the threshold. I don't want finance asking questions before the dinner. I read that single line twice. There it was. She might not have forged every single expense, but she knew enough. Keep it below the threshold. Not don't do it. Not ask Mark. Not this is wrong. Keep it below the threshold. Margaret spoke softly. I am sorry. I just kept reading Derek to Rebecca. Once the Blake initiative launches, Ward can't pull back. Unless it looks like he hates patience. Rebecca, don't underestimate him. He has patience until he doesn't, Derek. Then keep him patient. That one almost made me laugh. Almost. Rebecca had kept me patient for years, with the oldest tool in marriage, a weary smile, a hand on my shoulder, a promise that Derek is complicated but harmless. A reminder that you are strong enough. You don't have to be insecure. Strong enough, that is what they call you when they want you to endure disrespect without complaint. At 10 p.m., Margaret submitted the criminal referral package to the Financial Crimes Unit. At 1:30 a.m., Gabriel suspended Derek's consulting contract pending cause. At 2 a.m., the Foundation demanded the immediate return of disputed funds. At 2:15 a.m., the hospital finally notified Rebecca. She was placed on administrative leave pending investigation for credential abuse, conflict of interest, and donor funds. She called at 2:17. I didn't answer. She called Margaret at 2:19. Margaret put the phone on speaker. Rebecca sounded totally off. Mark, I need to talk to you. Margaret stepped in Colonel Harper. This line is for legal communication. He is there, Rebecca insisted. He is not, but he is listening. I said nothing. Over the line, Rebecca took a shaky breath. Derek is gone. Margaret watched me. I stayed still. He completely emptied out the rehab apartment, she went on. His phone is dead. The hospital suspended me. They think I helped him steal the cash. Margaret asked if she did. No. Then a heavy pause. I really do not know. It was her first honest answer since the accident. I knew he was rooting things around. I honestly thought it was just paperwork. I figured once the initiative actually launched, everything would just normalize. Margaret kept her voice completely flat, but you approved keeping it right below the threshold. Rebecca went dead silent, then softly admitted it. Yes. Margaret jotted a single word on her pad. Admission. Rebecca's voice dropped to a whisper. Mark, I was only trying to protect the project. I leaned closer to the speaker. You were just trying to shield Derek from scrutiny. She let out this tiny broken sound. I really thought he needed a win. He took mine. I know he did. No. He took my money, my agreement, my access to the house. He took my family seat, my mother's name. When I was bleeding right in front of you, he took your hand too. Her breathing shifted. Mark, do not use my name as a door. Margaret ended the call. At 4 p.m, police found Derek hiding in a private airport lounge. He had not not quite. Just trying to board a chartered flight to Nassau with a single carry-on and $78,000 spread across 3 separate accounts under his LLC. He had not been formally arrested yet, just detained for questioning after a financial crime referral and a few suspicious transfer alerts suddenly tripped. Rebecca got the news from Dennis, not from Derek. She headed straight to the police station. I went too, definitely not for her, but to give my statement. The waiting room was ugly and harshly bright. Cheap plastic chairs, a humming vending machine, some tired father quietly arguing with a teenager, a television mounted way too high on the wall. Rebecca sat near the corner in a wrinkled coat. No makeup, stripped of all authority. She spotted me and quickly stood up. Mark, Margaret stepped slightly in front of me. Rebecca caught the movement, her expression crumbling around that tiny physical barrier. I am not going to touch him. Margaret flatly replied that she certainly was not. Then a door opened. Derek walked out alongside Detective Alvarez. No hospital blanket, no podium lights, and no Rebecca holding his arm. He looked much smaller. His eyes found her first, Ellie. She took a half step toward him, then froze. Alvarez told Mr. Blake his lawyer was notified and not to leave the jurisdiction. Derek nodded quickly. Rebecca just stared right through him. "Did you use my login?" He nervously checked the waiting room. "Rebecca, please, not here." "Did you use it?" He dropped his voice to a hiss. "You told me to keep things running smoothly." Her face drained of color. "I told you to stay below the threshold. I never told you to forge Mark's signature." Derek's eyes wildly flickered. Margaret kept her pen moving. Alvarez was watching them too. Derek suddenly realized exactly what he had just confessed. "I mean, no, that came out all wrong." Rebecca took a step back. "You forged his signature." Derek's mask finally shattered. "Do not play the innocent victim here. You wanted that initiative. You wanted Mark's name scrubbed completely off it. You wanted me back in your life because he made you feel like a basic funded employee inside your own operating room." Rebecca physically flinched like she had been slapped. "I stayed still." Derek just kept going, sheer panic stripping him right down to the ugly truth. "You said he would never, ever leave. You promised he would always come crawling back. You said he loved you way too much to let things get this ugly." The sterile room seemed to shrink around Rebecca, not because everyone was staring, but because those words had absolutely nowhere left to hide. She looked at me. I stared right back. I offered nothing. Derek pointed a shaky finger at her. She approved the bridge. She knew. Rebecca spoke quietly. "I protected you." Derek let out a single laugh. "Ugly and thin. You were only protecting yourself." That was the exact moment the dynamic completely flipped. Not in some corporate boardroom, not on a massive stage, but right there in a police station waiting area under buzzing fluorescent lights, where Rebecca threw her man to the wolves, using me as a shield before the ink on her statement was even dry. Detective Alvarez cleared his throat. "Colonel Harper needs to speak with you alone." Rebecca seemed not to hear a word. Her gaze was locked on Derek for the very first time. She no longer saw the fake story she had carefully built. No tragic victimhood, no hidden talent, no romantic hero who got away. Just a desperate man totally cornered by financial records, willing to completely bite the hand that had once lifted him above everyone else. Margaret gently tapped my sleeve. "We are done here." As we walked toward the exit, Rebecca called out, "Mark, wait. Please." I did not stop walking. Behind me, Alvarez sternly repeated her title, Colonel Harper. This time, there was absolutely no open door for her to walk through. Only a cold interrogation room and the heavy consequences waiting right on the other side. The divorce mediation meeting was locked in for 8 in the morning. Another early dawn. It honestly felt rather fitting. Rebecca and her lawyer, Victor Tain, showed up early. A polished suit who looked exactly like he was hired to make this disaster incredibly expensive. She showed up in a black suit. Zero jewelry except her wedding ring. I noticed because she practically flashed it at me. That band sat on her finger like a stubborn argument. I walked in with Margaret and a file box, bare hand. Rebecca noticed instantly. A tiny, painful flinch crossed her face. Good. Not that suffering fixes the past, but the truth really ought to leave a mark. The mediation room was all beige walls, a long table, and a bleak alley view. Absolutely zero chance of mistaking this for romance, which helped. Victor opened with quiet dignity. He said Colonel Harper was ready to settle things privately. He claimed she admitted to making pressured mistakes, was eager to apologize, and would offer a very generous split of the assets. Margaret just looked at him. Generous? With whose assets, exactly? Victor adjusted his pen. Rebecca stared at the table as he continued. He argued that marital property included shared accounts, lifestyle assets, and any career appreciation Colonel Harper gained during the marriage. Margaret opened the first folder. It also covers unauthorized transfers and potential repayable sums, plus disputed expenses for Mr. Blake and the financial hit from Colonel Harper using joint funds for third parties. Victor tensed up. He called the claims unsubstantiated. Margaret casually skimmed the audit. Some were fully documented, others currently under investigation, all of them legally disclosable. Rebecca reached for the report, then froze. She knew that exact gesture. The halfway reach. Access denied. Victor told us not to conflate the divorce with the hospital investigation. I leaned back in my chair. When my wife lets her ex-husband drain my money, use my home, and tells me I am just jealous, they are absolutely conflated. Rebecca shut her eyes. Victor warned that emotional outbursts wouldn't help us here. Margaret gave a faint smile. Then you will definitely want to see this spreadsheet. For the next hour, Margaret brutally reduced my entire marriage into data columns. Mortgage payments, household deposits, massive credit card bills, Derek's shady transfers, foundation misuse claims, vehicle leases, and random travel costs. Guest room charges and legal risks. The numbers did what feelings never could. They killed the excuses and exposed a damning dated pattern. Her lawyer completely stopped interrupting around page 6. Rebecca stayed dead silent until Margaret brought up the night at the hospital. Then she looked up, claiming she didn't know I was hurt that badly. I stared right back. You saw the blood on my shirt. You told the nurses I could wait, thinking they would handle it. You were wrong. She swallowed hard, claiming she had already admitted that. No, you were just saying it now because we are recording. Her eyes instantly welled up. Victor touched her arm. She yanked it away, insisting she needed to speak. Margaret just nodded. Go on, Rebecca. Look directly at me, she confessed. I chose Derek in that hallway. I chose him because I really thought he was dying, and I figured you were strong enough. I assumed you would understand later. I had spent months letting him make me feel completely responsible for his life. None of that is an excuse. The room went dead quiet. Then she admitted letting Derek into our home, letting him bleed my resources dry. I let him take the credit because I convinced myself you didn't need it. I turned your love into permission. Finally, she was actually describing it correctly. Not jealousy, not a misunderstanding. Permission. So what do you want from saying all this? Her tears finally fell. Nothing. I just waited. Then she whispered, no, that isn't true. I want you to look at me like I am still the woman you married. I looked at her. Carefully, completely. I told her I couldn't. Her shoulders slumped. Victor desperately tried to control the room. He offered a deal if I dropped the civil claims over marital conduct. Colonel Harper would surrender her claim on the house. Margaret's tone instantly sharpened. Victor insisted they were just negotiating. No, I said you are trading my own house for my silence. Rebecca turned to Victor. Stop, he frowned. I echoed her stop. Suddenly, her phone rang. She looked down. Her whole expression shifted. Victor said, don't answer. She took it off speaker. But Derek's voice bled through anyway. Ellie, they are trying to pin everything on me. You have to tell them we had approval. Tell them Mark knew. Rebecca turned to ice. Victor lunged for the phone, but she yanked it away. Derek kept going, you owe me. I only came back because of you. You promised he would cover it if things went sideways. You said he always paid to keep your life clean. Slowly, Rebecca's eyes met mine. Dawn returned. The hospital cafe. The signed application with her fingers lingering right on the envelope. I thought she was just making panic choices after trauma. Now I was hearing her ex describe the marriage she had actually been exploiting. You said he always paid. Margaret quietly slid her phone onto the table, actively recording. Victor frantically whispered to hang up. If I go down, Derek threatened, I am not going down alone. Rebecca finally killed the call. Dead silence. Then Margaret announced we would request the recording be preserved. Victor dragged his hands down his face in defeat. Rebecca just stared blankly at her wedding ring. She slipped it off, slow and deliberate, resting it on the table between us. I didn't touch it, she said. What are your terms? Margaret answered instantly. Full cooperation with the fraud investigation. 0 claims on the residence. Full repayment from Colonel Harper's separate assets for any marital funds Mr. Blake used. Written proof that Mr. Ward never harassed, assaulted, or financially retaliated against the patient. Immediate withdrawal of the defamatory donor misconduct claims. Contact strictly through lawyers. A fast-track divorce wherever legally possible. No public statements unless attorneys review them first. Victor looked completely insulted. Way too harsh, he snapped. Milder than legal discovery, I replied. Rebecca just stared at the ring. Margaret spoke up. What about Derek? That depends on the police, the hospital, the charity foundation, and anyone else he defrauded. What about me? Rebecca whispered. I looked right at her. You either get honest right now, or you become his co-defendant in every single courtroom he faces. No pride left. No act. Just a woman finally realizing she was staring into an absolute void. I lost you, she said. No, you traded me away. Her hands shook. I let the silence do the work this time. At 10:12 a.m., Rebecca signed the preliminary mediation framework. By 10:19 a.m., Victor officially withdrew those misconduct allegations. At 10:31 a.m., Rebecca gave written consent for a forensic audit of her devices, tracking Derek's access. By 10:44 a.m., she agreed to zero direct contact with me. Standing up to leave, she abandoned the ring right on the table. Victor saw it and reached out. Rebecca stopped him cold. Just keep it. Once they were gone, Margaret eyed the band. You want this? No. What should I do with it? Log it as property. Bag it for evidence. Because that was all it was now. A piece of metal tied to a contract she had fundamentally shattered long before she ever laid eyes on those court documents. The temporary order hearing took exactly 47 minutes. All the time needed to formalize her consequences. Rebecca and Victor sat at one desk. Derek took a spot behind another, flanked by his own separate lawyer, because by then the foundation had slapped him with a civil lawsuit and police were fully investigating the financial fraud. He refused to look at Rebecca. She glanced his way exactly one time. The judge flipped through the files with weary precision, the careful, mechanical precision of someone who had seen every possible shade of human betrayal and gave up being surprised years ago. Mr. Ward is requesting exclusive use of the residence, along with ongoing asset restrictions. He also wants reimbursement accounting and attorney-only communication. Colonel Harper disputes the reimbursement scope, but accepts the exclusive use terms. Correct. Victor quickly stood up. Correct, Your Honor. The judge then stared at Derek's lawyer. Mr. Blake's counsel is here regarding the protective financial order. Yes, Your Honor. We intend to contest the characterization of specific transfers. Margaret stood up tall. We have bank records, equipment logs, duplicate invoices, and a blatantly forged donor signature. Characterization is no longer debatable. Derek just stared at his hands. The judge turned a page. Colonel Harper, did you authorize messages telling Mr. Blake to keep expenditures below the financial review limit? Rebecca got to her feet. Her voice was quiet. Yes, Your Honor. Victor tensed up. The judge peered over his glasses. Did you know Mr. Ward had not approved certain expenses? She hesitated. I didn't verify the authorization. The judge frowned. That is not an answer. Rebecca swallowed hard. I deliberately avoided verifying it. Better than any apology. Pure truth under oath. Margaret kept a straight face. I didn't flinch. The judge jotted down some notes. Temporary order granted. Mr. Ward gets exclusive use of the house. Mutual non-disparagement remains in effect. Colonel Harper is strictly banned from transferring, hiding, or leveraging any marital assets. Accelerated reimbursement accounting. Attorney-only communication. All disputed transfers are reserved for civil litigation. This court recognizes the overlap with external investigations and will step back entirely. The gavel slammed down. Rebecca's marital stakes dissolved in less than an hour. Outside the courtroom, her cell phone started ringing. She glanced at the glowing screen but didn't answer. Derek was already walking right toward her. Rebecca, we have to coordinate our stories. She looked at him like he was standing miles away. No. His jaw tightened. Don't do this out here. Do what? Pretend you aren't completely involved in this. For the first time in days, her gaze turned razor sharp. I was part of trusting you, part of protecting you, part of being arrogant enough to think Mark would just absorb the collateral damage. But I never forged his signature. Derek closed the distance. You think that little distinction saves you? Margaret lightly tapped my arm. We both stopped walking, perfectly content to listen. No, Rebecca told him, I think it will convict you. Derek laughed bitterly. You're choosing him after all this? She looked my way. I gave her nothing. Zero rescue. Zero warmth. No shared enemy. The realization finally hit her. I am choosing the truth. Derek's mouth twisted. You are choosing whatever keeps your license. Rebecca flinched. He had aimed perfectly. Then he turned my way, asking if I was happy about getting my revenge. No, that stopped him cold. I stepped right up. I got the records. Revenge is just what guilty people call accountability when it finally arrives. His lawyer pulled him back. Stop talking, Derek. Good advice, but too late. By that afternoon, Gabriel sent out an internal notice. Colonel Rebecca Harper was stripped of her department leadership pending review. Not fired yet, but totally stripped of authority. Her name vanished from the surgical innovation page. Derek's file vanished. The Blake Initiative page returned a 4004 error. At 5 p.m., the State Medical Board confirmed they received the complaint and opened up a preliminary review. At 5:30, the Foundation filed to recover disputed funds. At 6, compliance ordered Rebecca to surrender all her department financial devices for imaging. At 6:12, she tried calling me. The call went straight to Margaret's office. I only knew because Margaret forwarded the transcript. Rebecca's voice, saying she understood. She said she shouldn't be calling but just wanted to hear me once. She knew there were no excuses left. Tell him I finally understand the hallway. Margaret asked if I wanted to reply. I said no. Understanding wouldn't reopen that door. 2 days later, Rebecca arrived to pick up her reserved items. Security, Margaret's assistant, and a clerk were present. I stayed in the study, not hiding, just refusing to perform grief. Through the camera feed, I watched her walk through the exact room she used to rule without a second thought. The living room where she took Derek's calls while I cooked. The kitchen where she admitted to feeling insecure. The guest room where Derek used to sleep. The hallway where our wedding photo no longer hung. She stopped before the empty rectangle on the wall. Her shoulders trembled once. Then she moved on. The clerk handed her boxes. Medical journals, clothes, a framed diploma, and a set of knives she had bought in Kyoto. She asked about the blue cup. The clerk checked his list disposed of. Rebecca closed her eyes. That blue cup belonged to Derek. Good. Some things just aren't worth keeping. At the study door, she paused. Only half her face showed on camera. Mark, she said softly. Margaret's assistant told her Mr. Ward wasn't here. I know he is, she insisted. Silence. She stood there for a long time before setting something on the small table outside my door. Her hospital ID badge. Not handed to me, just abandoned there like a withered leaf. Without that place, I do not know who I am, she whispered. I almost answered. Almost. Then I remembered her emergency room words. He can wait. I let the silence answer. She left at 3:40. By 3:45, Derek was arrested for fraud, forgery of authorization, and attempted financial concealment. At 4:22, the news reached Rebecca. At 4:31, she phoned Margaret. This time, she wasn't looking for me. She just wanted to know if cooperating could lower her own risk exposure. That was the final twist. Not love, not grief survival. She finally arrived exactly where Derek had arrived first. Looking for the least painful way not to drown, Margaret told her to use her own lawyer. That evening, I sat alone in the study. The hospital ID badge on the desk. The plastic card still showed Rebecca smiling in her white coat. Colonel Rebecca Harper, Chief of Surgery. That title was already outdated. I slipped it into an evidence bag, not because I needed it for the lawyers, but because I truly needed that reminder. Some people do not lose themselves all at once. They trade pieces away, one little transaction at a time, calling it compassion until the final bill arrives. Next morning, Rebecca's lawyer sent over revised settlement terms, full concession on the residence, plus complete reimbursement accounting, a written correction to the board, 0 direct contact, and an expedited divorce. She no longer had conditions, only a signature. The divorce was finalized that Thursday morning in a courtroom even smaller than the waiting room where Derek betrayed her. No shouting, no dramatic breakdown, no final embrace, just a judge, 2 lawyers, a clerk, and the painfully clean sound of a legal bond being completely severed. Asked if she understood the agreement, Rebecca stood up. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was perfectly steady. That part actually surprised me. But then again, when it came to holding a scalpel, Rebecca had always been steady. The final order was absolute. I kept the house. She dropped any claim to the Ward Foundation, the Lillian Ward Centre's finances, and all donor assets. She took full responsibility for repaying the marital funds used for Derek's personal benefit. Pending final accounting, she completely withdrew the accusation that I acted because of donor instability. She agreed to zero direct contact. She accepted that all future communication would firmly go through our lawyers. The judge signed. The clerk stamped. 10 years of marriage ended as a file slid into a drawer. Rebecca didn't shed a tear in the courtroom. She saved it for the hallway. I heard her long before I saw her. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just a shattered breath near the window. Margaret gave me a look. I shook my head and we kept walking. Rebecca turned Mark. Margaret stopped Colonel Harper. It was fine, I said. Margaret stepped aside but stayed pretty close. Rebecca clutched a folder tight against her chest. Her left hand was bare. So was mine. I will not ask you to come back. Good. The word hit her, but she took the blow. She said she had absolutely no right. She knew what happened. She paused, then said she wanted to tell me everything. I told her I already knew. After a moment, she looked toward the elevators. St. Gabriel's gave me a restricted clinical position after the review. No leadership, zero financial authority, no research control, 1 year of supervised practice. The committee report blasted my poor judgment, undisclosed conflicts, and how I facilitated the misuse of donated funds. That wasn't a career ender. It was worse, the operating room. I asked about Derek, formal reprimand, mandatory ethics program, monitoring. If anything else surfaces, suspension. She swallowed hard. He took a plea deal for the financial charges. Restitution, probation, possible jail time depending on sentencing. Those foundation civil claims will haunt him for years. Good. Her lips trembled. She said he tried to claim he planned everything. Of course he did. I remember what you told me. What? That he would end up blaming me? I said nothing. She looked away. My parents sold the lake house to cover the loan after you withdrew your guarantee. My father no longer speaks to Derek's family. My mother stopped wearing the bracelet Derek gave her at that dinner party. There was zero satisfaction there. Just a brutal reckoning of names, assets, families and careers, all damaged to match their choices. Rebecca kept going. Most of our friends do not call anymore. The ones who do just want to know if the rumors are true. At the hospital, people lower their voices when I walk in. She forced a grim smile. I used to think silence meant respect. I looked right at her. Sometimes, I said, it just means evidence. She nodded once as a tear slid down her cheek. I deserve this. I didn't offer any comfort. She wiped it herself and that mattered. I went back to the hallway. She said her body went totally numb after her shift ended 2 nights ago at St. Gabriel's. I stood exactly where you had sat. The floor had been scrubbed 1,000 times. There was absolutely nothing there, but I kept seeing you. Her voice thinned out. I kept hearing myself say he could wait. The elevator doors finally opened right behind her. A young resident stepped out, spotted Rebecca, and quickly looked away. That was it. Not just cheap gossip, but the undeniable collapse of her name. In the very hospital she once commanded, she was now a cautionary tale. Rebecca saw it too. Her shoulders pulled tight. I wanted to save Derek because years ago, back when he was nothing, he made me feel chosen. Then you fell in love with me when I actually became someone. I confused debt with love, confused love with something that would always wait around. I told her I did wait. I know, she replied. And then I bled. Her eyes fluttered closed. When they opened, her last hope had vanished. Not because I was cruel, but because I was crystal clear. I am so sorry, she said. I know. Can you forgive me? No. She nodded once like she expected it. Maybe she even wanted it. A clean rejection is way easier to survive than false hope. Will you ever? I really don't know. But forgiveness won't change the final outcome. She just breathed through that sentence. Are you happy? I thought of the big house, the empty walls, the quiet study without her footsteps. My mother's name was finally restored on that agreement. Patients continued getting their funding through independent management. Leonardo officially led the emergency care review. Priya was promoted to head of safety implementation. Derek faced his sentencing. Rebecca stood before me with absolutely zero excuses. Happy really wasn't the word. Free, I said. That clearly hurt her the most. She pressed the folder flat against her chest. I wish you had always been that way. Then she turned and walked straight to the elevator. This time she didn't look back. Derek's sentencing went down 6 weeks later. He dodged a long prison term, financial crimes, after all, ending grey rooms, and negotiated penalties, not dramatic endings. But he didn't walk away clean. Heavy restitution, probation, and a suspended sentence hanging over his head, civil liability, and a professional blacklist. His consulting LLC was officially dissolved. His healthcare strategy career was dead. The hospital stopped taking his calls entirely. The guy who once sat in my chair became a name whispered during compliance training. Don't be the Blake case. That was his whole legacy. Rebecca's consequences dragged on much longer. She sold her downtown apartment to cover the massive compensation and legal fees. She lost her role as department head, lost donor access, and lost the unquestionable pride of the Harper family. Gerald, the man who once ordered me to dinner, actually sent me a handwritten apology letter. I never replied to it. Cynthia mailed over a box of my old holiday gifts that Rebecca kept at their house. I donated most of it. Later, Paul testified in the civil case and texted me. He texted that I deserved better. I just replied yes. The house grew quiet in a different way. At first, the silence felt like hurt. Then, it just became space. I took down the last wedding photos and patched the wall where the biggest frame hung. I even replaced the mattress in Derek's guest room. I changed the study lock before realizing I didn't need to lock anything in my own home anymore. Meanwhile, the Ward Foundation finally finished restructuring. No department head could approve funds tied to any personal relationships. No emergency pathway could bypass independent triage. No donor program could get renamed without verified attribution. The agreement returned to its original name, the Ward Foster Emergency Access Model. I added Priya too. She deserved it. At the unveiling, Leonardo stood by my mother's photo. You okay? No. He nodded better? Yes, enough for now. He was right. Across the hall stood Rebecca. She attended as just a staff member. No leadership, no podium, no speech, no diamonds, only a white coat. A badge without the director title. A face paying for her choices. She stayed away. Honestly, that was the first respectful thing she had done in months. After the ceremony, I walked down the gleaming emergency corridor, doors opening and closing. Patients rushing in, doctors moving fast, life just marching on with cruel indifference. I paused exactly where I sat bleeding. I still felt a hand against my flank, the freezing wall behind me. Derek's smug smile through the oxygen mask, Rebecca's voice cutting sharply right through the crowded corridor. He can wait. She was wrong. I didn't wait. I recorded the video, signed the documents, submitted applications, cut access. Let the evidence speak where my love was used against me. That is exactly why I will never go back. Not because I will hate her forever. Hate is still a form of attachment. I just finally see this marriage clearly. Rebecca never lost me in a single emergency. She lost me every time I called my pain strength. Whenever she treated my patients as resources. When she let him spend my cash, sit in my chair, steal my role, and call it need. The corridor just made it visible. I signed those papers at dawn. The court stamped them months later, but the real divorce happened the second she looked at my blood, then walked through the operating room door right toward Derek. That was the choice. Everything else was consequence. I walked out of St. Gabriel's Hospital and into the clear morning light. No ring, no waiting call from Rebecca, no shared accounts, 0 visitor passwords, no apologies to process. My phone vibrated. Margaret messaged final compensation received. Case closed, except for Derek's civil enforcement. I just replied good. Then I headed to my car. Behind me stands the hospital where she chose her ex. Behind me is the family that misjudged me. Behind me is the man who tried stealing my place, only to end up buried under his own medical invoices. Ahead isn't romance, revenge, or a woman waiting to heal me. Just my life back in my hands. That is enough. I drove off before the early shift change. This time, no one made me.